Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 2 of The Gold Heist. My name is Parallel Mike, and you can find me over on Substack at the PM Report, where I write about precious metals and finance. And you can also find me at parallelmike.com. Once again, I am joined by my co host, Andrea Chehi, who you can also find on Substack. And as last time, we're going to be covering some of the most important topics related to money, real money, that should be, and that's gold and silver. So, first and foremost, welcome back, Andrea. How are things with you today?
Thank you, Mike, and it's a pleasure and a privilege to be your host. I really love your show. I'm doing great, and I hope you're doing the same. And thank you once again for the invite.
Well, I have to say, Andrea, it seems like we've created quite a buzz with this new show we're doing together, The Gold Heist. I had so many people message me and say they're really excited to see where this goes. So thank you for joining me again. And this month, our first topic that we're going to be discussing is China's recent announcement that on July the 24th, which obviously is now passed, banks in the country are no longer allowed to sell retail customers leveraged gold products. Now, Andrea, in the West, we know that the majority of gold purchases by retail investors, by hedge funds, even pension funds, the very few that do own gold, it's nearly all paper gold, whereas in China, it's nearly all physical. And now it's almost guaranteed that if you are an everyday man and woman and you want to get involved in gold, you will be buying physical. So it seems to me China's drawing a clear distinction between owning real physical gold and gambling on the price through bank created contracts. So, first and foremost, Andrea, why do you think China's moved in this direction? And do you think it's a significant move?
Very significant. Is a life-changing operation. The paradigm is changing diametrically. Is a incredible. I mean, the people don't have the they didn't. I mean, they should reflect on how the magnitude of what's going on. It's really immense. And what it seems to be happening is that China is not making any default steps. It's just every move they make is just perfectly calibrated. It seems to be part of an incredibly well thought strategy. That's what you expect from a country that is taking the leadership in every aspect. So, they had already conquered the manufacturing. They had already conquering the trade. They are moving with such a strategic um, perfection into creating the right alliances for trade and for controlling the supply chain. Now, what they needed was to get monetary superiority, and that is happening also. So I mean, what's next? I mean, that's it. It's game over for everybody else. What they did is so immense. So they seem to understand what gold is, the relevance of gold, uh, something that on this part of the world is totally forgotten. I was just I'm back. I'm back in Italy now for the summer. I was just talking to some friends, and they reported me this incredible situation. They were telling me about this family who went to the one of those We Buy Gold shops with a bag of family jewels. They sold it to go on holiday. So what kind of disaster? What's in the people's mind? I mean, that's your gold reserves. That's your family jewels. You sell them to go on holiday. So this is really something that I mean shocked me. I say we are at the point in the Western world where to still um, pretend a lifestyle that is not there anymore, and then we don't admit that it's the end, that you just end up selling the family. That gold, once it's sold, is gone. For what? For a holiday, for a vacation, for like 15 days at the seaside. I mean, this is utmost irresponsibility. So what China is doing is that is a long, well planned strategy, and they put gold at the center of the economic foundation. Once the gold is there, that gives solidity to everything else. So I think this is a massive move, and now they eliminating the paper, um, because it's incredible how you have a commodity, a precious metal like gold, and you have a derivative, the paper, controlling the price of the real thing. So it's completely subverted, and now they put in they're putting the truth where it belongs. And let's see how it plays out now. If these tricks with the paper are eventually eliminated, uh, it is a good thing for every one of us who hold gold, and it's a good thing, I think, in the end, because the truth is always a good thing.
Wow, I think you laid it out really well, Andrea. I absolutely agree. I think this is one of the most significant things that has happened in the gold space in my lifetime. It's absolutely huge. It's kind of like a nuclear weapon in the monetary system going off, and people don't realize it yet. But it's just really important to reiterate that what China's doing is going to a physical only settlement. So it's not about them banning gold or stopping citizens owning gold, because I've actually seen some Western media outlets try and frame it that way, which is a clear misdirection. Chinese citizens can still buy physical gold bars, coins, jewelry. And in fact, the whole operation that China's playing at here is to funnel them into physical metals. Now, I think the reasons for that are twofold. Firstly, it's because we're in a financial reset. So the volatility in metals is going to increase. That was the case in the 1970s, which was only a small reset in comparison to where we are today. But we know that during the 1970s, gold went up 23 times or 2,300%. And that was amazing, but along the way, there was certainly sharp corrections, which is normal during a reset, and some of those corrections were pretty huge. There was one between 1974 and 1976. It went on for a year and a half, and that correction was almost 50%. Now, the reason for that is partly because of the paper gold markets. When you have speculators, they will get involved in any trend, whether it's oil going up, whether it's Beanie Babies going up or Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. The moment a price starts to go up, the speculators get involved. And for a time, people like that because they see the price go up faster and faster and faster. But they're not there for the long term. They're not gold holders if they do this in the gold space. They're just chasing a trend. And when they see the price start to slow down, they pull their money fast and it leads to such big corrections. Now, the first thing I think China want to do is insulate their citizens from that. They don't want them to get overexposed and to lose money in gold. So that's one reason why I think they're going to physical. But I think the wider implication on the physical is it kind of fits into that broader strategy that you was just alluding to, Andrea, which is they're trying to make their market a physical market. They know about the debt Ponzi and the derivatives Ponzi's that exist in the West. At the LBMA, yes, they do physical settlement, but if you go to America, the COMEX, or as the Crimex, as we lovingly call it, they are
Uh,
only settling around 5% of their contracts in physical metals. The vast majority are paper contracts, and it's well known that they don't have anywhere near enough physical metals to back the gold contracts that they're giving out. So China doing this is forcing more real physical metals out of the West and into China. And I think that's going to speed up the unraveling of this whole Ponzi scheme around gold that exists in the West. Is that how you're seeing it as well, Andrea, that this is kind of like an act of monetary war as well as being something that's beneficial for Chinese citizens?
yes, it's a game that is in motion. The West is in a very difficult situation. The thing that worries me the most is that when you see that the economic situation cannot be handled anymore, they escalate the the problem, and they start the military tensions, the war. So the fact also that mm, they actually dubbed Ministry of War. They don't even hide it. There is this what do you say, trick of the tongue. Like almost like a pun. You amongst all people, you get the chairman of the Federal Reserve, whose name is War. So you seem to hear this word, this even in the name of the guy. You of course, it's a joke, but you seem to hear this war as a only possible solution for the West to just I don't know, like like in those Western movies, right? When the guy at the table is caught cheating, he has the gun under the table, and then he flips the table and starts shooting. When he is caught that he doesn't have any more dollars to gamble, he can't keep the trick going, Is I think we are in that kind of same situation as in the Western movies. The gun is under the table gets flipped over, and then they start shooting. And then by reading the history over and over, you see that it has happened already with the same exact same pattern. I was just reading recently about the America Civil War in the 1860s, how the same way they had to paper over the gold, and they had to persuade the citizens to buy treasuries to finance the war. Isn't it the same exact thing? A bankrupt country that is in the total disarray because of deficits that cannot be funded anymore, they resort to the latest tricks in the book to get the money from the people, transfer it to the treasury, and then the money's gone. And that is happening again. It's just more sophisticated with technology. They're using this for some almost like phantomatic paraphernalia of names that we can't even wrap our heads around. I mean, you wrote an article we should be you know distributed to every household to understand how it works. And congratulations for that. I mean, I suggest all the people that listen to your show to read it, understand it, and share it, because that is fundamental. That is really what's going on. It's just one big heist, a gold heist. They take the gold from the people, the central banks. They distribute these notes, and then they erase it. They erase them, blaming the war. Uh, there's nothing new under the sun. So China is playing a different game. Is they're trying to rebuild um, an equilibrium, for which they benefit, but everybody might benefit also. So if this gold revaluation is really going to happen, and then they probably put in the West with their back against the wall, and they're gonna have to do it. Eliminating the paper was one indispensable step towards that next step. So I we're in the process of the most monumental monetary reordering in the history of mankind. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be painless. And but I think revaluing gold is the less painless solution, because the revaluation of gold, you're not revaluing something that puts industries out of business. Gold is just you would say a rock, a pet rock that sits in a vault, right? But it has this monetary purpose. So if you revalue it, it has a very few industrial uses. It has some, but if you revalue it, let's say a lot, you're not hurting some fund. With silver is a different story, because how much if you revalue silver, how much does a solar panel cost in the end? Because that silver is a very important industrial metal, but gold isn't. That's why central banks, they have gold reserves. They don't have silver in their vaults. I mean, only some, but the massive amount is gold, and it's always been like this. So I really think we are living in these times, and going through these times without any gold for anybody, for any household, is very irresponsible.
Yeah, and it's kind of wild what you said about your friends talking about people selling their physical gold to go on holiday. I think that really just exemplifies the problem we've got in the West, that we don't understand real money. We don't understand what money is anymore. I made a post today on my Substack where I said, this was the average US salary in gold, and I did it for every decade from 1970 all the way up to today. It's collapsed. The average salary in
With the same
gold in the
coin, it's smaller and smaller.
1970s, say it was smaller and smaller. It went from 171 ounces to today it's around 17. That's a 90% collapse in the purchasing power that people have or families have in the US. But people don't understand it that way, Andrea, because they see the nominal price of things going up, not realizing that it's all inflation. It's just inflation that's pushing those numbers up. The real purchasing power is collapsing, but gold exposes that. And I think that's why they don't want people to own physical gold. They only care about speculative products in the West because it does mask the illusion. And it usually, for retail investors, leads to great losses. I know a lot of people earlier this year in December, January, which was the end of a massive first wave up in gold. It was huge. It went from 2,000 an ounce all the way to 5,500. And like I said before, the speculators getting towards the top. And I noticed it was around that time that the media suddenly started to become positive on gold. And they was
Yeah.
telling people in their articles, maybe now is a time to buy gold. Maybe it's going to 6 or 7. Now, of course, it's going to 6 or 7, but my point is they get people involved in the gold move right towards the top of a first wave. And then when the correction comes, people sell and they think, oh, now's a great time to get rid of that gold. I wish I'd never bought it. And it feels to me like China's doing the opposite. They want their citizens to be long term holders, knowing the reset's coming. But in the West, they want us to lose. And I just can't help but think that this is a part of the end of the dollar system. This is a part of the big financial reset and the revaluation. And that's kind of worrying because it feels to me like they're setting the West up to be the big losers in this, which is what I personally believe. Are you in agreement on that, Andrea, that we're seeing the locus of power move from West to East and this is wrapped up in all of that?
I subscribe every word you just said, and to like add to what you just said, I have to tell you a couple of things. One is one person. His name is Wolfenson. He used to be um, the World Bank chairman, and he wrote a biography that I read, and he also did some speeches in university. In one of his speeches, he told people, "Look, I think it was Harvard or Stanford. They say if you, it was many years ago. He told the students, which were probably the next leadership in the U.S. They say you cannot ignore China because the world is moving that way." And another friend of mine, who's an historian, he showed me this pattern that keeps repeating, and how as the history civilization, it moved from east to west, and now it looks like it's going back to east. You know how the early human civilization, they started in the east, then through Greece they came to Rome, and then it moved to America. Like from Europe to the American continent, and then it looked like it's going around the world again and going back to China. So it's probably part of some forces that we cannot control, and the movement that is inevitable, and we observe it happening. So our how my humble contribution in this moment is to make people aware of what is happening. In Italy, sadly, where that is my country, we observe through those we buy gold shops. I read an article, I think it was on the Financial Times, that stated that 120 tons of gold every year leave Italy and go to China from these people like those what I just told you. They sell gold to go on holiday, right? Some probably sell gold also because they are devastated by the crisis, but a lot of people, they just want to show off, buy a new car, and they saw the older generations, they had gold in Italy, like the grandmas and grandpas, but the generation from my age down, they don't even understand gold. They're like, if you tell the word gold, they look at you like with circumspection, like suspicious. What is he trying to sell me? Is he trying to crook me? You know, you have the euro, the crookedest currency. The big. I mean, in 20 years has lost more than 90%. You could buy a kilo of gold with 10,000 euros. Now you need almost like 130,000. So what hope you have in the purchasing power of the euro? Now they as you said, they increasing the cost of everything. So that inflation is eroding your purchasing power. Here where I live, they just increase substantially the taxes for the garbage. What you do? You just have to pay all the I just saw a report. Whatever is not imported from China is prone to increase in price. All those services, schools, public services, public transportation, healthcare, mostly. Um, diagnostics. So that inflation hits hard. And then if you have savings in the bank just sitting there, they're gonna be hit hard. They increase the banking fees, the inflation, then probably restructurings of the bank. There is a very big high risk, and it's relevant. What is so hard to understand that gold in the long run saves the purchasing power of the debt-based currency. It's very simple, but people don't want to understand it. That's why during the resets, very few people save themselves. The majority gets wiped out.
Yeah, and I think it's very obvious why the US and the West don't want people to own physical gold. They'd much rather you buy some leveraged paper product because those products are essentially dollar derivatives and gold competes with the US dollar system. So the more people that go to physical gold, the more actual debt is retired. When you buy physical gold, you retire the debt, you hand it back to them and you take real money. And that speeds up the decline of their Ponzi system. So of course they don't want you to own physical gold. But China clearly does want to end this current system, and it is that transition of power. But going back to what you were saying, Andrea, about the understanding of gold in the West, I think they've been very successful over the last 50 years at propagandizing people so they have no concept of what real money is anymore. There's a fantastic book by Anthony Sutton called The War on Gold that was written just towards the end of the 1970s. And he pretty much predicted where this was going to go, that this transition would happen towards China. And he also spoke about the war on gold in terms of propaganda, and they've been very successful. You will have been a young man in the 70s and 80s, Andrea. I don't want to age you. You'll have been a young man. But what you'll remember is back then, if somebody was successful, like a CEO or somebody that was running a business, they would have a gold watch, like an 18 karat gold watch. Today in the West, the most popular watches that people pay $50,000, $70,000 for are stainless steel watches. So even the watches today have no real intrinsic value besides the workmanship. But back in the 70s and 80s, people would not have dreamed of paying 50 grand for a watch without at least having 3 or 4 ounces of gold in. So that's just another example of this shift that's taken place. And I had a friend who was speaking about watches to me recently, and he said, Mike, today you can buy vintage watches for almost the value of the gold content. And sometimes you can get them cheaper than the value of the gold content because that's how little people understand the value of gold today. They'll sell a watch that has 3 ounces of gold in the bracelet and strap, but less than the gold content because nobody cares about gold. They want stainless steel. So I just think that's an interesting aside as to what's actually happening in the West right now.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Also, my jeweler of trust, where I go buy my, then some little presents for my daughter and my wife. He told me the same thing. He say there is this line made of made. I won't say the name, but he's a very famous designer, right? I won't say the name, but then is actually stainless steel. So they say, and then he was telling the guy, look, there is this replica which look exactly the same, but it's silver. They say, no, 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 I don't want it because it doesn't come with the box of the name brand. So, I won't be able to impress my girlfriend. So that's just, how what George Carlin say, buy things you don't need with money you don't have to impress people that don't, like,
Yeah, well, I can't
they,
help but think, Andrea, that this is gonna come back to hurt us substantially in the West. When this system falls apart and we can see on the horizon, we're getting very close to that. As that image that I shared today showing you the collapse in actual real salaries, they're coming for the last vestiges of wealth in the West. And the moment we have another crisis in this system, at that point, there's going to be a real accounting that's done. And people in the West are going to have their paper contracts and they're going to go, oh, well, I've got gold. I've been saving in gold. I bought an ETF or I bought this paper contract, and they're going to go and ask for the gold. And maybe only 1, 2% of those contracts will be redeemed and everybody else will be defaulted on. Meanwhile, people and citizens in China will have gold. And if gold gets revalued much higher, Chinese citizens could see themselves 50 times, 100 times more wealthy than a Western citizen. And that is the real switchover of power that I think we're going to see. So let's now speak a little bit about is another topic, but it's related very much to this, and that's the accumulation of gold by central banks. Obviously, China is one of the largest accumulators of gold in the world, but we've also got central banks like Poland, Kazakhstan, who are record buyers too. What do you make of that, Andrea? Is this all just connected? It's the same narrative, just looked at from different perspectives?
Yeah, well, if somebody who has a you don't really need to be extremely, bright. You observe a pattern, right? You see central banks buy gold, so you can come up with this with a you can anybody can explain that to himself. You don't really need to be an economist. So the next question should be, why are they doing it? So um, you know that monetary policy is dictated by central banks. So this is a global thing. And everybody needs money for everyday survival. Money is issued by central banks, like, and then through the other to the commercial bank through fractional reserve, but initially from central banks by discounting treasury bonds, right? So if you see that the main actor in monetary policy is accumulating gold, that should raise some red flags, right? So I don't know. I don't want to answer this question because I know everybody has an answer. I mean, everybody who follow you should have an answer. But then just probably think about it. If they are accumulating so much gold, maybe, and I say maybe, gold is going to be relevant in the future of monetary policy. I think so, very relevant, because it wouldn't be otherwise.
Well, let's speak about the elephant in the room first and foremost, and that's the US, because a lot of talk has gone on over the last 50 years about the actuality of the US gold reserves. We know that during the previous monetary reset, when the Bretton Woods system was created, which was after the end of World War II, the US had gone from having maybe 15% of the world's gold reserves at the start of World War II to having over 50% of the world's gold reserves. So they had the bulk of the gold, which meant they got to dictate the terms of the next system. Now, it took a world war to hoover up all of that gold and give the US that kind of transition of power. It was handing the baton from the British Empire or the City of London to the US. But this time around, China's already accumulated most of the gold. They've got the largest reserves by far. I think anybody who looks at this knows that, maybe not officially, but unofficially, we know China's got the biggest reserves. So, kind of like the monetary side of this has already been dealt with. So, we're in that transition period, and now you're seeing all these other central banks in Europe accumulate gold. But do you actually think the US has any interest in accumulating gold, or are they happy to just sit there with no reserves? Is this kind of a coordinated shakeup that's happening behind the scenes, and we're just expected to believe that the US has gold? Because recently Scott Besson had another one of those interviews where he said, "Trust me, the gold's there," but nobody trusts him. I don't trust him. You don't trust him. We know the gold's not there. Otherwise, they would show us. They'd do an independent audit. That's not happening. So let's speak about the elephant in the room first, Andrea. What do you think about America's gold reserves right now? Why are they not buying?
I don't know. I think the Fort Knox is like the Schrödinger cat, right? He can be there, he cannot be there at the same time. But in the end, who cares? If the perception is that the gold is there, we can all pretend that the gold is there, and then everybody still needs dollar. It's very hard to, for as much as we hate what is going on, but the dollar is still very difficult to pull out the paradigm painlessly. It still allows some kind of functioning of the economy, even though it's completely unbalanced. But you cannot rebalance these kind of things all of a sudden. Nobody wants this to happen, let alone China, that they need the American consumer. So everybody needs the American consumer. They print money and buy stuff, but what happens if they stop doing it? You can imagine the amount of families and disruption that depend on this. This has been going on for over over 80 years. You cannot undo a system like this in an instant. So it's going to be a process. It's going to take time. Gold, it's not just the cent that spoke about the Fort Knox gold. You remember the other administration? It was Mnuchin. The first thing he did, he went to Fort Knox and he kind of put his head out of the hole Yeah, the gold is there. He made that kind of visible stunt, declaring that the gold is there with some kind of statement like, "Oh yes, we're safe. The gold is here. The gold is there." So nobody has ever seen it but them. So, but they made sure, these treasury secretaries, that they told us that. So this is also for probably part of the situation. The thing is that China is playing with the real gold, and it's true what you said. The official reserves, they are not such an impressive number. But then, since China can buy, whatever is public, and private is practically the same thing. If they buy through private individuals, they can mask the public purchases, but they still it's still gold in China. It still belongs to China. So it's true what you say, that the official reserves might be maybe 1 0 more than the official number. So instead of 2,000, probably 20,000 ounce. And so they're not ready to announce it, because I think this move with the paper had to be done first. Um, once once they're ready, the United States is already chosen its path. That is the bifurcation of the monetary system with the stable coins. So they probably will have this system where people buy treasuries through their with their money, with their 401ks, um, and they will kind of give some credibility to these treasuries, probably backing them by gold with the gold revaluation. This is also probably a possibility to or, something that we should keep an eye on. Um, I think no matter what, Mike, and this is my simple like reductio ad unum, like make it very simple. In the end, what do I care about other people's or countries or central banks gold reserves if I don't have any myself? Because what matters is the gold that I have in my pocket, not what other people have in their vaults. It's my gold that should matter, and uh, that's why we go back to the same kind of number one probably strategy now is to have some gold personally. Because if I look at somebody else's wealth, I mean, congratulations, but if you don't have any, I mean, well, you don't have any. You just depend on those who have, and and the golden rule is those that have a gold make the rule. So you either make the rule or you obey.
That is the golden rule. And the elite families for thousands of years, Andrea, have kept their wealth in a very small number of things. It was gold, it was jewels, it was fine art, it was land and property. It was real stuff. It was always real stuff that you could put your fingertips on, that you could lock away in a vault, that you could pass on generation to generation. Obviously, in the modern era, we've got an infinite number of financialized assets, and the new scam is stablecoin and Bitcoin and all the digital assets, NFTs. People were bidding up the prices of those things. Most of them have collapsed 100%. Nobody will buy an NFT, fake digital artwork. So again, we are living in an illusion. There is an everything bubble in terms of the financial markets, but we live in that bubble. And most people in the West have no idea what they're doing. They're going to continue believing these falsities up until the point the whole thing bursts, and then they're going to know what's real and know what's not. But just going back to central bank gold reserves, just for listeners, I just wanted to explain the history. From 1971 to 2009, central banks were actually net sellers of gold. So it was the 2008 GFC that changed that paradigm. So we saw gold go up 2,300%. And then the US created the petrodollar system. It was that collapsed the gold price, because all of a sudden central banks needed US treasuries. They needed dollars to buy oil. And that's the system we've lived in. Then the 2008 GFC happened. And very quietly, central banks started to accumulate gold, and China started to accumulate a lot of gold. And that was actually when China said to their citizens for the first time, you're allowed to buy gold. And so the citizens were buying, China was buying. Obviously, since the year 2000, gold has gone up substantially. We're currently at around $4,000 an ounce. And since 2009, central banks have increased their purchases year on year. Up until the point the last 5 years, it's been record levels of gold buying. And it's not just China, there's Western central banks and Eastern European central banks. And the thing with the Ponzi scheme is it doesn't work in reverse. So if they start selling off these US treasuries, and all of a sudden shift to gold, that essentially breaks the petrodollar system, which we know is ending. So my question to you, Andrea, is where does the demand for US treasuries come in? I think I know myself where it's going to come in, but if it's not the central banks, who is going to
Well,
be left holding the bag for the Ponzi scheme? Who's going to be left holding the bag with all these US treasuries?
that's a. I mean, for what I know, for what I read, is that the whole purpose of stablecoin is to create this demand for treasuries. So how they're going to play out, this is to my understanding, is that they're going to, people like to buy online and to consume. Now they created this merger and created these gigantic corporations that people are familiar with. They like to shop from. So they create these digital wallets with these corporations where they can put their dollars in, and they will be converted in stable coins. And with those stable coins, they have their wallet. They probably also, and they with those wallets they buy indirectly by treasuries. The stable coin holder buy treasuries with the people's money. Even here in Italy now they passed the law where there is people are whenever you get a job, you are mandated to deposit something called like for your retirement. Is the company that hires you put some money aside that is only given to you when you retire or when you quit the job. So there's only very limited possibility for you to get hold of that stash. It's like a cushion. Now they made it mandatory that you have to decline expressly that you don't want that stash to be invested in the U.S. You know, uh, hedge funds and casino gambling. So because if you give this money to the hedge funds or to the pension funds, the track of your money is lost. It's given to these trading desks, and you know what happens next, right? They gamble on the derivatives like drunken sailors.
It's
So
it's the famous South Park episode where the little kid goes in with his bank deposits and he wants to put it in a savings account, and within a few seconds the guy tells him it's gone. Well, that's kind of what's happening to our wealth in the West.
Exactly like that. It's like you have somebody, well, to make not to stray away from your question too much. So they already have the system implemented where they are using people's savings, um, voluntary deposits that people are going to be very happy because probably you see, you create a wallet for your shopping with these corporations that you already buy from, and you instead of just having your cash there, they're probably giving you a yield, let's say 4% yield. So so wow, not only I get to shop on that particular platform, but I also get a interest on my deposit. And so this will be probably like a nudge technique to convince people more and more into this direction. And this will create an artificial market for treasuries, which is nothing but a doubling of the system. You have practically two dollar denominated assets, so it doubles the problem. I don't think it solves it, but then it just gives some time, give US some times to give some credibility to its debt. We are reaching some numbers that are astronomical. You're paying the last report I read is like 24 billion per week in interest only. How can you sustain those kind of numbers? It's insane. It's the end. Everybody who is observing these numbers, it can't keep going. And then you see the deterioration of a lifestyle. People working 3 jobs, they can even pay bills. They live in cars. So this is tragic. Is the tragedy of the currency collapse. Is a tragedy. It's one of the saddest thing. The currency collapse. Very few benefit, and everybody else is destroyed. That's why giving trust to that currency is a recipe for absolute destitution.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what's going on in America right now is it's about maintaining the illusion of being the world's only superpower and in control, but actually behind the scenes, everything that we're seeing in terms of the dollar system shows me that America is desperate. That's why they've had to turn to stable coin. And the largest holders of US treasuries right now is hedge funds. So you've got this weird situation where if you look on a world map and say, which countries have the highest holdings of US treasuries or the largest purchases is the Cayman Islands. And obviously, the Cayman Islands government are not buying these treasuries. It's hedge funds that are based out of the Cayman Islands. Then you've got the stablecoin companies being brought in too. And eventually, that's going to be passed on to the citizens who are going to be holding these things. So it's just another game of pass the debt parcel. But once all of this unravels, yeah, it's going to be a catastrophe for America. Yes, they might lead in terms of military power and in terms of technology. But that's not a good thing because that means that without the dollar to control the rest of the world, all they've got is military might. And that's kind of the final stage of an empire. If you look at Great Britain, World War One and World War Two was their final stages, and they came out of it much poorer. And it's going to expose America's unfunded liabilities. There's hundreds of trillions of dollars of social security and Medicare that they don't have the dollars for, they don't have the gold for. So they can either print it or default. And obviously, a default in this instance will be a world shaking event. So that goes back to why all these central banks are quietly accumulating gold is they know that default's coming and they're thinking, well, we better have something in reserve. And this goes back to the individual level. You as a citizen, you need to know that default's coming. All of monetary history gives you
Yeah,
100% certainty and surety that that
yeah.
event is going to happen. There is no point in any
No,
of the history I've studied where anyone comes back from where America is right now.
no, it's true. And it's so linear. This line of thought is so linear that it's like impossible not to notice it. Uh, you know what? And that's what was going to happen. People will keep not understanding what happened. They will find themselves with this, the monetary reset. They wouldn't know. They would just be like, like the the deer in the headlights. Like some kind of a shocking event. Then you know what happens? The media propaganda will just invent some kind of lie. People will lose everything, and the banks will show the gold bars and say, "Okay, no problem. Look, we have the gold bars. We're gonna start over again." This is a wash, rinse, and repeat. It always happens. People will put their trust again in whatever currency monetary system is invented, and the cycle will start over again. It will for those who have gold, it will start over with a great advantage compared to those that don't have any. This is very simple.
Yeah, I'd like to end with a quote from a central banker, Andrea, and I want to get your opinion on this. What we often see is that central bankers are there to manage perceptions, manage expectations. So Kevin Walsh, who you mentioned, yeah, he's not there to fix anything. He has no real power besides being a showman, the same way Donald Trump's a showman. It's about managing this perception whilst the underlying fundamentals collapse and the dollar dies and all the things we've discussed. But what you do see is central bank managers on the fringes who are maybe not so publicized in the West, they can be a little bit more honest. And I wanted to read out a quote from Adam Glapinski, who's the president of the Polish Central Bank. And he has helped Poland accumulate a massive reserve of gold. They're one of the largest buyers. In fact, they were the largest buyer of gold in the world for a number of years over the past few years. So Poland is accumulating a ton of gold. And here's what he said, Andrea. Listen to this. When he was asked, "Why are you accumulating gold so rapidly?" this was his answer. Gold will retain its value even when someone cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electronic accounting records. Of course, we do not assume that this will happen, but as the saying goes, forewarned is insured, and the central bank is required to be prepared for even the most unfavorable circumstances. That is why we see a special place for gold in our foreign exchange management process. So I'll just repeat the key part there. Gold retains its value even if somebody cuts off the power to the global financial system, destroying traditional assets based on electronic accounting records. He's kind of telling you there, isn't he? He's giving you a very clear indication of what gold's about and why you need to own some. So, what's your opinions on that quote, Andrea?
Mike, when you were reciting these words, if you had been in a court in front of a jury, you would have ended it like, "And I rest my case."
They
you
would
know,
also call you a conspiracy theorist if you said this in the West, but this is actually a
right.
central banker saying this.
Yes, it's an actual central bank. And Poland is playing this card right. They didn't fall into the mass migration trap, so they kept their they playing their cards. That's why they give so much importance to gold. It's a different strategy. I kudos to the central bankers, and kudos to all those who are brilliant enough to follow these hints and make good use of them.
Well, it's funny. My wife is Polish, and in the country, this man, Adam Glapinski, he was accumulating gold back from the year, I think it was 2019, 2020. He's been in power quite a few years as the central banker. And originally, the citizens were being told by the ECB that he was ruining Poland, that buying gold was a terrible idea, and the ECB was dead against it. And now, these few years later, with gold having moved up so much and the value of those reserves absolutely skyrocketing, he's a national hero, and everybody in the country loves him, and nobody's
Yeah.
listening to the ECB. And one more thing on that, the interesting thing about Poland is they actually tell their citizens to buy gold too. And they've made it very legally favorable. So you don't pay any tax, any capital gains tax. You don't even have to report gold purchases. So again, there's this divergence. You could argue that Poland is a part of the West, but on a map, it's a little bit closer to the East, probably. So there is this divergence that's happening. And I would say to listeners, look at what they're messaging you around gold in your country. Are they favorable? Are they buying it? Are they telling you to buy it? Are they making it legally advantageous to buy gold? If they're not doing those things, then that's a warning sign that maybe your country is a danger to you and your finances. You want to be in a place where they're actually promoting that because that's setting you up for the next system, not giving you an anchor that attaches you to the debt of the old system.
Yes, yes, beautifully said.
Okay,
And
Andrea. Well, that was another great conversation, my friend. Fantastic
yeah,
words from you as always. I really appreciate your input there, Andrea. Just tell listeners again, Andrea, where they can find you on Substack.
yes, on Substack, my name is Andrea Cecchi. Just or I mean, I don't know if through Substack you can find me liking your posts. So from there, you can link to me because I really like and restack your posts. And I am also on social media, and you just write my name on the any search engine. Somehow I will pop up. I'm mostly um, like my YouTube videos are all in Italian, but I think now on YouTube you can select the language and it automatically translates. I If I have something really important to say, I will publish a video. A very I'm very active on these platforms. I'm not very prolific. So when you receive a notification that I wrote a newsletter, is probably something you shouldn't be miss because it wraps up a lot of very useful content. My Substack has the option to um, have a paid subscription, and whatever I collect from the paid Substack and the sales of my books, it all goes to charity. And I also publish on my Substack the charitable events that myself and my readers, we can all rejoice for the good that we share.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Andrea. I will definitely point listeners in the show notes to your Substack. And like you said, when you do post, it's not AI slop, it's a real person writing with real information. I always enjoy your newsletters, so definitely would recommend that. And obviously, for listeners, if you want to find me, you can find me on the PM Report on Substack. But I do just want to take this moment to give myself a quick plug because I do have group coaching for investors coming up at the end of August. So this is a chance to work with me live on Zoom. There's also multiple recorded workshops, and this is about getting yourself ready for the coming reset. We do discuss, of course, gold and silver strategies, the cycle of empires, contrarian investing, And I share how I'm managing risk and also trying to increase my family's wealth going into the reset. So if you'd like more information, please reach out to me in a private message and I will tell you more. In closing, thank you so much for listening to episode number 2 of The Gold Heist. And we look forward to speaking to you again in the coming weeks. So thank you, Andrea, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. See you next time.